3 miles off China's coast, a U.S. Seahawk helicopter locked eyes with a Chinese Z-10 gunship. And for over an hour, the standoff hung in silence, except for radio challenges echoing across the strait. Then suddenly, the Seahawk cut into the clouds, disappeared, and re-emerged, speeding directly toward the Chinese pilot before veering off at just 500 meters. Why would Beijing risk airing this encounter on state TV? And what did Washington gain by flying so close? This was much more than a near miss. It was a calculated signal with global consequences. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Why would China risk showing the world footage that proves a U.S. helicopter closed within sight of its coastline? On August 1st, the day Beijing marked the 98th anniversary of the People's Liberation Army, state broadcasters released video of a tense aerial encounter. The editing framed the scene as a patriotic duel, the American helicopter as the intruder, the Chinese gunship as the guardian standing firm. It was packaged like a highlight reel, pushed across national TV, and tied directly to slogans of strength. What looked like a dangerous standoff in military terms was presented as a victory, timed perfectly for a holiday that honors the Army's founding. What makes the release unusual is what it reveals. Footage of foreign forces operating so close to Chinese territory could underscore vulnerability rather than triumph. But instead of suppressing it, Beijing magnified it. The decision points less to military logic and more to political theater. By showing the PLA shoulder to shoulder with the nation at its symbolic front door, the government confirmed its strength for an audience at home. It was not simply about what happened in the sky, but how it sounded and looked on screens inside Chinese living rooms. The video carried every dramatic beat. In the recording, pilot Kong Shenghui issues steady warnings across the radio, calling the Seahawk to turn away. His tone didn't waver, even as the American helicopter cut into clouds and came out again, almost on a collision path. The clip captured the moment the Seahawk accelerated toward the Chinese side before swinging off just half a kilometer away. For a domestic audience, the imagery was unmistakable. A cool-headed Chinese pilot holding ground against an unpredictable foreign rival. What in another country might be classified and archived for intelligence purposes became the centerpiece of a patriotic broadcast. Military analysts have pointed out that the timing was deliberate. Choosing to publish this confrontation during the PLA's anniversary was no coincidence. Such dates are always used to reinforce the idea of endurance and vigilance. A normal sortie caught on radar would have meant little to the public, but a sharp 90-second cut of tense commands, sudden dives, and close approaches reinforces slogans about national defense in a visceral way. It was carefully released for maximum resonance, overlapping pride in the armed forces with the visual of American pressure met and checked. Looked at closely, the encounter functioned less like a tactical mission and more like a set piece. The Chinese pilot may have been responding to a real intrusion, but the distribution afterward reshaped it into performance. The message was not aimed at changing U.S. flight plans. It was aimed at binding Chinese citizens tighter to the military's role. International observers might measure ranges and altitudes, but residents of Beijing, Shanghai, or Chengdu were intended to measure confidence. Here, the PLA was not just safeguarding airspace, but acting out a story that reinforced unity in the face of outside pressure. The cost of staging such moments, however, lies outside of that domestic bubble. Every time Beijing highlights an incident, foreign militaries pay closer attention to the exact details: the range, the location, the response. Surging the narrative of an expulsion only underscores how often U.S. aircraft and ships are actually present in the strait. Rather than lowering visibility, it raises it. What meant strength at home translated abroad as acknowledgement of persistent American reach. The more propaganda turns into performance, the greater the risk that adversaries interpret it as posturing that demands a counter-demonstration. This incentive cycle does more than fill television screens with patriotic images. It brings tensions closer to the surface in one of the most contested waterways in the world. And that is why, if propaganda fuels the storyline, the very rules of the sea ensure the next act will be played on an even sharper stage. 3 miles from China's shoreline sounds dangerously close, but the question is always the same. Was that distance actually illegal, or just uncomfortable. To understand it, you have to picture the invisible lines drawn across every body of water. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, a nation's sovereignty extends 12 nautical miles from its coast. That zone is its official territory, no different than land. Beyond that, up to 200 nautical miles is considered an exclusive economic zone. A state controls resources there, fishing rights, oil, gas, but it cannot usually exclude foreign traffic. And this is where the Taiwan Strait becomes complicated. Its width stretches far wider than 400 kilometers, more than enough space that the center of the strait should fall well outside territorial waters. The American helicopter, even at just 3 miles away, remained outside the official red line of 12 nautical miles. But Beijing paints the picture differently. To China, the strait is more than a waterway. It is described as internal waters tied to sovereignty over Taiwan. Authorities argue that because they regard Taiwan as part of their territory, the passage in between should not be treated as an international corridor. In their narrative, foreign surveillance flights and naval escorts are intrusions, acts of intimidation that challenge national unity. The United States sees it in the exact opposite way. Washington emphasizes that the strait is no country's private channel, but instead an open corridor that supports not only trade, but also the transit of military assets from aircraft to destroyers. So every time an American helicopter buzzes the skies or a warship cuts straight along the midline, it is not seen as accidental. It is framed as a deliberate exercise to show the limits of Beijing's claims and to keep sea lanes open for everyone. Here is where the clash hardens. What Beijing calls an illegal crossing, Washington describes as innocent passage. A single maneuver, one altitude change, one patrol route gets recast in 2 different stories. U.S. commanders often announce operations in near real time. When a destroyer passes through the strait, press releases describe them as freedom of navigation exercises. In American eyes, that openness proves they are upholding international rules. But in the Chinese press, the event is rewritten as a hostile act. Headlines declare provocations. Commentators frame it as political theater meant to embarrass Beijing. To add weight, military video is sometimes pushed onto screens inside China to show determined responses, like the one with the Seahawk helicopter. This war of definitions is mirrored across other disputed seas. Near Scarborough Shoal, a Philippine reconnaissance plane flew near a reef in waters Manila calls part of its exclusive economic zone. China responded by labeling the flight a trespass in Chinese airspace. Filipino officials fired back, arguing it was within internationally recognized rights. Each side had a legitimate argument under its own interpretation of UNCLOS, and yet the clash produced the same dynamic. Different stories spun around the same movement. The Taiwan Strait magnifies that same problem, except the stakes involve 2 superpowers and a potential regional war. The clash in the strait was not random, nor a slip by either side. It was the product of 3 forces colliding at once: propaganda shaping how events are shown at home, legal disputes framing how they are fought abroad, and strategy ensuring both sides keep showing up. Beijing draws pride from repelling intruders, while Washington insists on proving the channel remains open. That cycle keeps danger in motion. As long as both audiences demand proof, neither pilot nor ship captain can back down. And the question lingers: what if the next close pass is not resolved in time?